I think the best thing about reviewing games is getting to double and triple watch a scene, recognizing all the details you missed the first time around because you were completely immersed in the moment. But double tapping that single scene can change your perspective dramatically. Sometimes you see the true commitment the writers made, the attention to detail, perhaps some foreshadowing of events or a callback to earlier moments. Then there's the opposite, where you realize you've ingested the equivalent of regurgitated dairy products 3 weeks past their expiration date.
I think I'm gonna vomit. Oh god, I'm gonna hurl. Gross. Don't let me drown in my helmet.
Yes sir, everybody. We're finally back to turn Endwalker a new one. There will be spoilers, as usual. I only promise to be as subtle as the game's script was. So, not at all then. Lord, I've missed this feeling. Ripping into Dawtrail is plenty of fun. There's just so much to rant about, but it's nice to stretch the metaphorical legs and remember that all our problems didn't start with Dawtrail. It's more the accumulation of issues 14 and Square in general have been suffering from in recent years. But let's not have me get off track, we'll be here all day. This year is a scene dissection. If the title card wasn't a giveaway, a scene at a pivotal moment in Endwalker's narrative. For a quick recap, feel free to skip to the timestamp if you don't give a damn. We travel to the past to seek out the cause of the final days. Well, we went to Elidibus for information, and he just so happened to have access to the time machine. Nothing could have possibly gone wrong with that, right? And better yet, he knew how to use that time machine and sent us exactly where we needed to go. How very convenient. You'll be seeing more contrivances like that today, rest freaking assured. And yeah, I know time travel can validate some of this, but as we discussed in our previous FFXIV video, you really can't rely on temporal BS to make sense out of everything. It's just not that reliable. In the past, we meet our grumpy best friend Emmett Selk, and our trippier best friend Hythlodaeus. And the psychotic one. I get pissed off just looking at you. Begone, thought! In our investigation, we learn more about the Dynamis, and a peculiar bird person who can interact with it. Medion. In fact, she has a whole flock of sisters out amongst the stars, looking for life and meaning, which went about as well as you'd expect from sending essentially children with emo powers out into the universe. It all accumulates in a standoff within Katisa's Hyperborea, where Hermes chooses to side with the Medion and their nihilistic machinations. After a long battle, Vana and we barely escape the facility before a memory wipe robs Emmett Selk and Hythlodaeus of all knowledge of events that have transpired, and of those yet to occur. You folks know how I feel about Vana and all her decisions. Link to that video will be down below. My issues today are specifically the events within Katisa's, because the whole debacle is so contrived, so sloppily assembled. If you change even one single detail, the entire scene does not work. Grab a snack if you need one. I intend to be thorough and merciless. Oh, so merciless with this hell heap of a story. We start right here after the dungeon ends. Hermes is beaten to a pulp. He crawls to Medion searching for any kind of answer to his many ponderings. It's mighty polite of us, and Emmett Selk, not to immediately step up and end this debacle, being all too aware of the risks involved. How we all just stand there, doing nothing, increasing the chance of something going wrong. That's a recurring issue in this series, one that needs to stop happening. The fate of the universe is on the line, people. Maybe don't wait before securing the emo death bird. My usual policy when the fate of the world hangs by a thread is to knock out potential threats first, have existential discussions later. We really need to stop standing around when other options are available. It's getting old, Square.
Have you lost your mind?
Oh, sweet motherly hell. Us just standing there allowed something bad to happen. What a twist. Also, this is the first major issue we need to talk about. Hermes is beaten harder than a stepchild after Father Dearest has chugged down his 12th beer. And yet, he has the energy to bind 4 separate people, 3 of which are unsundered ancients, extraordinarily powerful entities, and Emmett is stated to be the most powerful sorcerer of his era. So how the hell is Hermes binding all of them like this? Now, we and Hythlodaeus, I can understand. He's not the most adept combatant, and we're a sundered soul. Emmett Selk and Vana do not make sense, they're both pretty tough. I suppose we could argue Hermes got the drop on us, and to be fair, they break free of the bonds before long. So that's a route we can't consider. Though it raises another question of how Hermes has a binding spell powerful enough to bind other Amritanes. Having binding spells at the ready to deal with the creatures is reasonable. Strong enough spells to contain your peers? Not so much. Outside of the occasional overpowered monster, Hermes would never need such powerful techniques. Not to mention deploying said method on 4 separate people at the same time. While critically weakened, one is bound to be skeptical. Another option is the facility itself produces these binds. That could account for why they're powerful enough despite Hermes' weakness. But that again raises the question of why this place can contain powerful individuals of this caliber. It's like your local florist keeping a flamethrower on standby in case the weeds are too numerous to pull out the ground. And I won't lie, that's something I would pay money to see. So, in order, Hermes needs 1. Possess a powerful enough spell to bind people at the ready. So powerful, it's debatable he'd have something like this in the first place. And other characters not having similar abilities creates their own problems. We'll get back to that. 2. Enough strength to use said spell on 4 separate targets, well weakened. And 3. He needs our characters to not break their chains until the dramatically appropriate moment. That is several unlikely conditions all lining up at once to make this action happen. Do you see the problem here? Because we know what happens, we know what our failures mean here. Events that lead to and cause that failure are paramount. And these events are playing out like somebody was forced to rush this scene through the editor's office ASAP.
Who is to say that you are
Hermes snapping like this bothers me for several reasons. I'll save that discussion for his own video. Subscribe and stay tuned for that. I plan to churn out several Endwalker videos while Dawtrail content is on the back burner. But for now, let's consider what happens next.
Kairos? Awaken!
Memory reconfiguration system Kairos activated. Awaiting instruction.
Ah yes, the memory wipe. An important tool needed to ensure that history cannot be altered by our actions. Imagine if something with this specific function didn't exist. Look, sidestepping my pessimism, I get the idea. A powerful civilization like this utilizing memory wipes for their creations, rather than sending them to the butcher, is perfectly reasonable, and not out of the bounds with their level of advancement. But this second ability, being able to create whole new memories, it changes the formula. Why would you need to replace the memories of those creatures you're experimenting with? I suppose it would prevent previous experiences from altering their behavior, but then how and why would any creature possibly go awry like we saw with these Fenrir-looking beasts we had to put down? Couldn't Hermes just use Kairos to alter their memories, making it so they were never aggressive in the first place? That and his binding spell would have made his whole scene and the resulting emotional outbursts he has completely pointless. And all this serves a factor in Hermes kicking off his villain arc. It's very confusing why he wouldn't just do that and avoid the moral repercussions altogether. What's more though, why would an ability this lucrative not be implemented throughout their society? I mean, it could be used to weed out aggressive behavior, reform the criminally minded, and act as a form of therapy for those who experience trauma. There are insane possibilities and moral implications with such a powerful mechanic. Now, maybe that's why they don't use it for such things, but that creates another problem. Because Kairos was powerful enough to wipe the memories of Amyrtines, Hermes included. You would think a society this uptight would have some regulations over such things. And if you think these people are too lax in their superiority, we've already explained in previous content Amarant was surprisingly resilient, and they were thorough using alternate sites to contain their more dangerous creations, as we saw in Pandemonium. Given the function of Kairos, this raises other issues such as why not use this ability to calm the beast stored in there? If it can alter Amyrtine memories, it ought to work on these more unruly beasts. There are multiple contradictions in how this game wants us to view the Ancients, not just their character but their abilities and powers. From what we have seen, many of the problems in Ktisis should have been mended before we ever got to this point, and they all remain unaddressed, just so we can have some conflict to resolve. It's stupid for any of these problems to exist. Nonsensical conflict can only create unearned resolutions. That is unsatisfying.
I'm just so depressed. I can't even threaten your life for being a total jackass. Jackass, I'll kill you.
And truth is, we don't see enough of Amarant to make a lengthier analysis of their potential. I just wanted to point out the insane contrivance of having a memory-altering device Hermes can spawn on a whim. Not to mention said alteration device not possessing any relevance in situations it would have been appropriate. It only makes the absurdities in Ktisis stand out all the more. Something else to point out. Hermes orders the wipe to start from the moment Emmett Selk arrived at the facility. How would this system know the exact moment of that event? Hermes wasn't aware of our arrival until it was brought to his attention. Does this memory wipe device monitor everybody in Elpis? That is remarkably convenient as well. Also, Kairos needs time to prep for the memory alteration. Just imagine if that weren't the case and the wipe was instantaneous. Our escape, the not tagging Medion, everything afterwards cannot happen. Meaning,
We're boned.
really though, if Kairos fired instantly, we lose. If Kairos took any longer than it did, there would be time for everybody to escape. We win. If this device did not work the exact way that it does, with zero alterations, this scene cannot happen, just like it was with the binds. And both actions have plenty of reason not to exist, as they do. Two unlikely events happening back to back only makes their existence all the more unlikely. Kairos was a contrived plot device to erase everybody's memories, sparing only those the plot wanted. And there's issues with that specific moment itself. Screw it. There's something wrong with absolutely everything happening. God help us. Now, I want to explain what I mean when I say something is contrived, because I've abused that word aplenty in this video and it must be getting tiresome. Not as exhausting as tearing this game apart. My god, it's been an experience. Dawtrail and Endwalker both are going to shave years off my life at this rate. Now, personally, I'm of the belief that every story has some degree of contrivance. It's impossible not to. You've only a limited time to spin a tale, be it a book, film, or game. Without some convenient elements to spurn things along, your story will be as long and as arduous as real life, which is incredibly boring and nobody wants to see that crap. The mere existence of convenient plot lines isn't a problem. It's when they're so poorly implemented and become so blatantly obvious, they distract you from the story they're trying to tell. Just think about it like this. We're not even done with this analysis, and there's a variety of problems worth noting. A writer's job is to integrate these points throughout the script, so much so that they're indistinguishable from anything else happening in the narrative. Let's look at Red vs. Blue. I know I've used them as examples before, but I keep borrowing these clips, it's only fair.
I am the best.
I really need to make a video on this series already, it's long overdue. So, Season 8. The AI Epsilon was transferred from a storage device into a new body. No longer needing it, they left it in the desert and went about their journey, completely unaware that those tracking them can alter that storage unit into a capture unit, something that becomes important at the season's climax. Now, all these elements, the AI, the storage technology, the protagonists, and those pursuing them, everything is a part of the same organization. Everything shares a common link. So these events I just described don't feel forced or out of place. They flow together organically. If the people trying to claim Epsilon had no affiliation with the program in question and didn't have the same background and training, then we'd have a major problem with them magically knowing how the AI works and how to capture them. It also helps that this chase occurs throughout the entire season and isn't all crammed into a single scene. That gives it time to breathe, to earn its place in the story. I stand by it, people. Square rushing the conclusion of the Hydaelyn arc was a huge mistake. Garlemald, a longtime enemy, was reduced to side character status, and then written into borderline obscurity. The status of the remaining Ascians is a mystery that's been bothering me for years. Why the hell would the Scions break up and deem their purpose fulfilled while members of that organization are still unaccounted for? We've seen the damage a single rogue Ascian can do. Ignoring important details like these only damages the story because people are behaving in ways you and I know we wouldn't be in the same situation. It's illogical, it's inane. Even filler stories, like side quests and personal character growth, things that may not matter in the wider scope of things but enrich them all the same. They need time and commitment to grow and prosper. It's quality versus quantity when you boil it down. You keep hammering out the details via editing over and over until you have a proper tale. This is easier said than done, obviously. Especially major companies like Square that have deadlines and too many corporate douchebags wasting time and pulling resources in different directions. But just look what happens when you neglect these necessities. Can you really tell me you still believe events in Katisis could have played out as they did? That isn't to say you can't have ridiculous moments at all. Comedy in particular is predicated on unlikely events happening to your characters. Back to RVB for a second. In another season, the team is infiltrating an enemy base in a winter environment. To avoid detection, they built and hid inside of snowmen. Yeah, that's stupid. Everybody's IQ just shrunk 10% from me uttering those words aloud. Yet, it works in this case because the Reds and Blues are always up to some kind of absurdity that defies logical comprehension. Dexter Griff, the one who came up with this dumbass idea, is renowned for putting more effort into avoiding work than if he just did the task in the first place. Is it any wonder Sarge wants to jettison him into deep space given the opportunity?
Jackass, I'll kill you.
It's practically their modus operandi. Ridiculous strategies no professional soldier would ever consider. I mean, if you saw a snowman, would your first instinct be to shoot it? Maybe. This guy did. And look how that ended for him. If you follow the series, there are endless examples of them adapting dumbass methods that pan out in the end. And yeah, plot armor is a factor. These are the main cast after all. And when characters do die in the series, oh man, it sticks with you. On the other side of things, you have Rise of Skywalker.
Boo! You suck!
Wow, where the hell do we begin? Besides everything, we have MacGuffins in the form of the Wayfinders, navigational tools needed to find the big bad of the movie, which are out here for reasons? I don't know either. A Sith dagger instrumental in finding the second Wayfinder, a dagger that remained intact after decades exposed to the elements, not to mention a fragment of the Death Star itself remaining exactly intact so said dagger will be useful for something. Add on top of that a multitude of force powers that have never been seen in the cinematic universe, confusing the hell out of moviegoers on where all these convenient abilities came from. As if it wasn't obvious Disney never had a plan for this franchise, Force Awakens was an unceremonious ripoff of A New Hope. Last Jedi, less said the better, it did nothing with itself or the trilogy, forcing Rise of Skywalker to compensate and failing miserably. Honestly, it does remind me of Endwalker, at least a little bit. They tried to force so much into a single game, it was impossible to make things work out. Still, compared to that Disney fiasco, my complaints about Endwalker do feel rather trivial. So allow me to thank you, Square Enix, for not sucking as much as you could.
Track sucks. You suck.
Those are just a few examples of how you can integrate plot points that feel natural rather than forced, and ways that don't. There are many more examples across the immeasurable scope of storytelling. Many are inspiring, others make you want to chug down industrial strength drain cleaner. Some are just amusing. I mean, hell, there's nothing wrong with liking something stupid. Endwalker had a lot of stupid moments, plots and ideas that don't pan out or add up. And if you still like Endwalker despite all those issues, that is perfectly fine. Just all my griping aside, I don't want anybody watching these videos to feel ostracized for liking a flawed product. So please don't ever get that idea. Hell, my favorite anime is Bleach. And while the final arc has been badass, mending many of the issues from the manga, for a long while there, we Bleach fans were left to suffer in obscurity. I'm just here to explain why more and more players are feeling frustrated with the direction we've been heading. Dawtrail is a testament to how much worse things have gotten. And while I hated Endwalker, at least it wasn't boring. That's something Queen Fury and her nation of baby killers cannot say. Anyways, let's get back to the scene.
Fly, Meteor!
Oh golly, look at them breaking their chains. And Hermes has enough strength left after binding 4 people and activating Kairos to block her, permitting Meteon to flee. Imagine if he did it and Vanal slipped right past him. Meteon would never have escaped. Hermes' memory alteration wouldn't have panned out with this very obvious contradiction, and history cannot play out the way that it does. How very convenient. Also, Emmett breaks his bonds right after Vanal and starts throwing blasts at the mass murderer accomplice, which he also blocks? Aha. Look, Vanal was unlikely enough, but Emmett Silk is a confirmed powerhouse. That Hermes could hold him off for long, if at all, is just ridiculous. Maybe Emmett was worn out too? I mean, 4-on-1 boss fight, I kinda doubt it. And if he was, why not bust out his own transformation, like Hermes did? Oh right, because then there's no reason for Hermes to still be standing there, and we could all make our escape before Kairos activates. And the rest of the plot can't happen. I mean, either that or the animation budget wouldn't allow it, take your pick. I mean, it's understandable. These transformations aren't meant to be used so liberally. It's only the fate of the world on the line. So not only have we multiple contrivances generating unlikely scenarios one after the other, but our characters are also behaving like morons to justify the events playing out. People got paid to write this. I want that injustice on record.
We don't get paid enough to do stuff.
And it somehow gets worse. We all know this moment, when Vanal just narrowly misses her chance to nab Meteon. The fate of humanity irrevocably undone in a split instant. That's gotta hurt. Does anybody else find it odd there's nothing else Vanal could have done here? I mean, Hermes was beaten like an emocentric mule, and he could still bind us for a short while blocking energy blasts. Does Vanal not have anything like that? No binding spell, no long-range attack? Because if she did, then it's unlikely Meteon would have escaped. And as a former Azim, she no doubt would have deployed all manners of creative tools during her journeys. I find it hard to believe Vanal had no other option but to grab at the bird girl like this. I know this sounds nitpicky. It's not like I have a bias against this woman. You backwards, two-faced, arrogant albino psychopath! Gods, I wish I could shove you into a vat of acid, that would be therapeutic.
You stupid bitch!
Maybe if every other event in this scene wasn't of equal or greater outlandishness, I wouldn't be so bothered by it. But everything in Catesis forces me to suspend my disbelief. We can't do that forever. With all the insane magical feats we've seen within Elpis alone, it is impossible to believe Vanal has no other strategy, and thus Meteon's escape feels unbelievable. And like so much else, said escape only happened so we could finish the fight in our own time, not for logical reasons, just a plot. With every improbable scenario, the odds of the next moment decreases exponentially, Hermes binding all of us. Not a complete stretch, but unlikely given his condition and how powerful his targets were. Kairos needing time to prep the memory wipe, when there are all manners of advanced magic that can be cast in an instant. and that it can affect beings as powerful as other ancients. That's more unlikely, if not straight up absurd. Hermes again, beaten and weakened, able to block multiple hits from powerful opponents. Yet no, that's stupid, especially when you remember Emmett has a badass final form that he never uses. Because apparently final forms are only allowed when you're the antagonist. I don't freaking know. Then the idea Vana had no other spell or ability to contain Meteon when the ancients were ludicrously OP. Bull. Straight up. Put all these moments together and you have yourself an impossible scenario being sold to you at full retail price. And we're still not done. Do you guys need a minute to get more snacks? I understand if you do. Man, commenters aren't wrong, my negativity is astounding. But to be fair, FF14 Super Saiyan God levels of stupid merits such blatant loathing. Some days I can't decide who pisses me off more, Wuklama for being an overbearing and grossly obnoxious protag, or Vana for being an unhinged psychopath the game open demands you get on both knees and... Don't forget the occasional breath before you... And then after all that, get ready for round 9. In all seriousness, one of these days I gotta start posting more positive material. Not on 14, mind you. Not the way things are going. After all of this, Meteon has escaped. Kairos is nearing the end of its slow-ass countdown. Super convenient. Now, the only factor that remains is our escape. Our buddy Hyphlodeus uncovers a quote, spatial confluence nearby we can escape through. Super convenient part 2, the reconveniencing. Yeah, sure, this facility is advanced, so I wouldn't be so bold as to claim such an escape route doesn't exist. But to have one located right beside this platform, of all this big-ass empty space going on up in here, golly. If it were further away by even a little bit, we'd have been mightily screwed, wouldn't we? But that isn't the biggest issue here. Not in the slightest.
Exemplary work, as always, Emmett Selk. There's no time! Quickly!
Oh, how clever. They misled Hermes, creating an opening for us. Well done, gentlemen. How did Vana know where the real confluence was? More importantly, how did she formulate a plan with Hyphlodeus and Emmett to snatch us up from the platform and make our escape? She couldn't have caught on to the strategy, occupied as she was. Sure, Emmett seemed to catch on to the plan, but he's at least right there in the middle of all this. How did everybody else get organized? Was it right here when Hermes was activating Kairos? He's occupied, so I guess it's possible, and the plan must be formulated here. Because the second Vana breaks free, she's chasing down Meteon, and the next time we're all together, the plan is being executed, and Kairos isn't activated until after we're bound. This is genuinely the only moment we could work things out.
You want the long version or the short version? I will take the easy version.
Not to mention, even if they could plan an escape without Hermes noticing, there's a lot of individual components in pulling off this maneuver. Vana has to try and nab Meteon, fail, because if she didn't, it's debatable she'd have the time to come back around for us while keeping the evil Deathbird contained. She then needs to swing back around to grab us right after we're thrown off the platform, because if we hadn't been thrown from the platform, she'd have had to drop right in front of everybody, spoiling the element of surprise. Not to mention we'd be pancaked into mush from the fall. Can't have that. Then Emmett needs to identify the plan that he apparently wasn't in on, despite being right next to the others while they were theoretically collaborating, and then destroy the confluence. Then, Hyphlodeus has to pull off the convincing act of targeting the fake confluence to kick off the distraction in the first place. None of this includes the potential for things to go awry and the characters needing to adapt. All this, everything discussed, every impossibility, every convenience, all of it you must believe at face value, or the scene does not work.
My logical data analysis sector indicates that would be highly unlikely, and my bullshit meter agrees.
Maybe it's a personal grudge, but I hate it when stories try to pull off a clever twist out of nowhere, even though in context it makes no sense. As is the case here. They make it seem as though we were knocked over the edge to our death, even though it was all a ruse to fool Hermes, and to surprise us the player, but there's no opportunity for everyone to piece his plan together, nor to get the timing right. It's not a clever counter to Hermes, it's several different actions forced together and played off as something astonishing. A last-ditch effort to save the day against the odds. Look, usually, I don't notice all the nonsense happening until I rewatch a scene a few times and pay closer attention. But the very first time playing Endwalker, this moment was a lingering mass of what the f***isms. 3 years later, it's somehow only gotten dumber. And it's still not the worst part. No, the worst part is what happens next.
Still, if it must be said, do not squander it. The legacy I leave you.
Final process complete. Executing universal memory alteration.
My first playthrough, I loved this moment. It was emotional, a permanent connection between us and the man who would one day become our enemy. Us reaching out for him, fearful of the inevitable, wishing against all odds that fate wouldn't be so cruel. It was beautiful. So, why is Emmett just standing there? He has a flying mount that he can summon on a whim. One finger snap, that's it. Is it Hermes? Is there some concern he'll attack us, or you if you try it? Hermes doesn't do anything here. Doesn't try to bind us, super convenient part 3, with a vengeance. I guess magic chains once broken cannot be remade. That totally makes sense. Hermes doesn't launch a fireball or any crap, he just stands there and lets us escape, not knowing what we, fully aware of his actions, may do. Nothing, we did nothing. I have an entire analysis about that, we're terrible people. So Hermes isn't even trying to stop us, maybe now. Finally. He's out of energy and can no longer put up a fight. Right when it's convenient for us to escape for the sake of the plot. How about that? If that is the case then, why doesn't Emmett summon his badass horse mount and escape with us? There's no risk. There's no reason not to. It should be easy. If Hermes is not worn out, then why isn't he trying to stop us? This whole motive was to make the fate of our species fair, which I have several issues with. Another time, you emotional tard, this video is getting long already. By not trying to stop us, Hermes is defeating the whole point of him going full Harvey Two-Face on us. It doesn't make sense. Both Hermes and Emmett Selk are not behaving in any way that follows logically. Why is the latter just standing there when he's ample opportunity to escape? Even if Hermes did attack, our team should be able to block a few shots on their way out. It hardly merits surrendering the very knowledge of events to come just for a poignant moment. This scene needed more. It needed much more to earn the events that create it, and to earn the ending which sets the scene for so much of our present timeline. This single inaction from Emmett Selk is as illogical and contrived as the entire rest of Catesis. My first viewing was filled with dreadful emotion. Subsequent viewings had me screaming unintelligibly like a schizophrenic foaming at the mouth. This moment does not earn the emotions it demands from you. Now, there are different ways we could have solved these problems. This isn't the point of the video, but let's showcase an example or two to get the point across. You can remove some of the action so there's less convoluted elements. Sometimes issues do factor back to having too much. Maybe we could cut out the binding scene and have Hermes create an explosion or some minor barrier to buy a few seconds, allowing Medion to make her escape in the confusion. It's not as verbose as this malevolent speech he gives, but it's more believable. A good distraction could have had the same results, less suspension of disbelief required. As for Emmett Selk just standing there while we get away, let's say instead of him firing shots at Hermes, useless as that was, he channels his ether into Kairos directly. He can't destroy it, only slow the countdown to buy time for our escape. That would not only resolve Kairos conveniently taking so long to fire, but also keep Emmett occupied and incapable of overpowering Hermes. Then it's Vana who shatters the confluence while we're whisked away to safety on Argos, and we both escape together. Obviously, Emmett can't both hold back Kairos and make his own escape, not to mention the strain is wearing him down, and Hyphodeus can't transform nor summon his own mount. Now we have a sensible explanation of why these two were left behind beyond the plot says so and dramatic timing. Of course, now I wonder why Vana couldn't have summoned the third and fourth Argos to whisk them away too. Screw it, I'm no miracle worker. All things considered, there were far better and equally efficient means of pulling this scene together. But, as is often the case with Square these days, especially in regards to 14, they just couldn't be bothered, and were made to satisfy with this half-baked scene meant to justify the next 12,000 years of misery this world is about to experience. And let's not forget, it's all thanks to Vana.
You stupid bitch!
Alright, I'm tired, pissed off, I need a nap. I'm gonna go do that. Like, comment, and subscribe. Different views and opinions are always welcomed here. They make this content far more interesting. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Till then.